Hello and welcome to Paradigm Playbook, a podcast for entrepreneurs in the business of sports. Your hosts, Dave Kozak and Steve Cook, are business owners, successful entrepreneurs, sports enthusiasts, avid readers, and longtime friends. For years, they've read every business book on the market and built successful companies with what they've learned. This podcast will give you the critical takeaways in just 15 minutes a week. It's a quick and easy playbook for building a winning sports business. And now, here are your hosts, Dave and Steve.
Thank you for listening. Visit ParadigmPlaybook.com to discover how we can support you and your business. Well, hello. Welcome back to Paradigm Playbooks podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Steve Cook.
It's good to see you, Dave.
It's been a little while.
Missed your last couple of weeks, but
the vacation has its benefits, Steve.
Good. You're refreshed and ready to go and kill it on this end. That's great.
Absolutely. We got our color commentator, Mr. Niall Cummins, in the background there.
Howdy, folks.
All right. So, Steve, what are we discussing today?
So we've been on this. We started kind of traveling through the sales cycle.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about prospecting the last time you were here, and who to speak to, how to speak to them, where to find them, and all that. So once we get to the prospect, the next step in the sales cycle is presenting. So you're presenting your business, your product, your service, whatever it is. So I want to talk a little bit about that presentation and how it can and should be structured. Everything from, what's an elevator pitch to what's the components of a good business story.
Yeah. I mean, so I use the term in my business, the conversion, right? So you prospect and now we're working on converting someone into a client, right?
Correct.
Want them to buy a good, a service, a subscription or something. And so the first thing is, if you did your prospecting right, the prospect should be an interested person by that point, right? They should be either in the market for your product or service. They should be at least enticed into something that you hypothetically could offer them, right?
Yeah. Currently, with the way the internet works and all the services that are available for searching and studying people, the qualifying part used to be part of the presentation, and now qualifying has shifted over more to the prospecting side.
Yeah, it's like the pre-qualification, right?
Yeah, so your best presenters should be getting the pre-qualified leads, the people that, as you said, that they're interested or somewhat interested.
Yeah, and again, I guess there's a different approach. If you're not, then you're kind of in the warming mechanism, right? Versus if they're not a pre-qualified lead, you're warming them along the way. So I think I like to think of it as a continuation of prospecting. Like ultimately, to me, a good prospect is someone that is actually desiring at least to understand what I have to offer, right?
Yeah, they want more information. A lot depends on whether you're making your presentation to one person, to a family, or to a group.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume in elite collegiate planning, you have a different presentation if you're speaking to a PTA group versus, husband and wife that's got a 12-year-old child.
Yeah, so we do a sort of a interesting process, because you could call, the historical cold marketing to qualified lead to, an appointment. And we offer the same information really no matter what group we're talking to. But a key component of this is you have to know your audience, right? So if you're in a one-on-one meeting, you have to know what their desire is. If you're in a group session, you have to know what attracted people to it so that you can speak to it. If we're talking to a group of parents, we're going to speak differently than if we're talking to a group of guidance counselors or for a group of, booster club representatives. And so knowing the audience is an important thing. One of the things we always focus on in our sales process is trying to have predictable outcomes, right? And the way you create scalable, predictable outcomes is having a sales process, right? And so I'm not talking about the beginning, middle, and end of a sales cycle. I'm actually talking about a process to the meeting, a process to the conversation, a process to what it is your objective is and their objective is. And I think, there's a book called Pitch Anything, and it talks about frame control.
Mm-hmm.
And frame control is the basic concept is we each have a frame, right? Call it a frame of reference, call it a frame of opinion, whatever you want to call the frame. But frames collide, and only one frame can win. And so in a conversation, we talk about politics right now. There is no frame. Yeah. There's two frames that bounce off each other and they don't talk to each other, right? It's the idea that you're convincing, but you're also trying to work with the person to get them to either catch the perspective, see the perspective, or join your frame, right? So
I think that's where you get the big concept in marketing today is attraction marketing. And that's what you're talking about. If you're talking to that group, the purpose or the process that you're laying out in your pitch is to divide out who's interested and who's not, and then, take a second swing. In the sports world, we tend to focus, and this is in any sports, we tend to focus on presenting our services to those that are already interested in that particular sport or activity. The mass opportunity is in the rest. So if you can attract 5-year-olds to baseball and then keep them in your academy or whatever till they're at least 12, which is kind of my goal, I think, just based on the years of service, the years in service, you're going to end up getting a greater return on that sales pitch. If you go after the stars of the Little League that are 11 years old, there's no guarantee you're going to keep them for 3 years. Yeah. There's a lot of Little League stars that, haven't the fundamentals to go beyond, and every sports gets harder. Gymnastics that we talk about all the time is kind of an exception to the rule in that the activity of gymnastics doesn't have to lead to the sport of gymnastics. So you can learn gymnastics for the sole benefit of improving yourself as a high jumper down the road, or improving yourself as a cheerleader or some other activity. So I think, one, identifying what you said, identifying who the customer is, and then 2, deciding how deep and the structure of the presentation or pitch.
Yeah. And so, there's this old story about the two brothers that were going to go into competition with one another, and they were talking about they were going to open burger shops across the street from one another. And I forget what book it was or what excerpt, but the two brothers are very competitive, and the one just kept saying, I want the best meat. I'm going to have the best furniture. I'm going to have the best chairs, the best service, the best this, the best that. And the other brother was just like, sure, you can have all that. And then he said, I just want one thing. And turns to his brother and he says, I just want a starving crowd. And so when you're talking about sports business, it's essentially a starving crowd, right? Because they're coming in for the purpose of doing that activity. You're not necessarily having to do what I would call a traditional sales pitch. You're not having to do a sit down presentation of those people. However, I think it takes a different tone, right? It is, how are you greeting that person when they walk in the door if they're going to sign up? Are you showing them the facility? Are you showing them the class? Are you showing them an instructor actually working? Are you able to show those things in that presentation, right? That's what I would call the presentation of facility and product. And are you able to show it at any time of the day? Are you addressing every person that walks in the door in a way that gives them the opportunity to observe the organization on a surprise basis, right?
I think one of the keys, you're correct. And there's an interested prospect, interested buyer. If you get them that far, your closing ratio on those should be extremely high.
Absolutely.
And one of the mistakes that's made with today's salespeople, I'll take this out of the sports world, because very few people in the sports business would identify themselves as a salesperson. I get into this conversation at all the talk I do. And nobody considers themselves a salesperson. I don't want to dirty myself and be a salesperson
God
and all
forbid.
that. Yeah, but we spend so much time discussing the specifications of the product or service, which are also what's on the website, and the interested party probably already knows that. I don't need, we were talking about cars early, Niall and I, because I have zero knowledge or interest in cars. I just, what kind of car do you want? And I want white. I
want a white car that starts and drives from point A to point B.
Exactly. That's it. So if somebody wants to start off that presentation telling me, it goes from 0 to 60 in this amount of time, or it has this much power or this fuel economy, or, it's like everything they say is driving me further away. It's like, just like, what's it going to cost me? How can I get it when, So I think part of the presentation has to be a fact-finding mission there's no sense overcoming objections that aren't going to occur. So you have to identify those, Ryan Holiday wrote the book, Obstacle is the Way. And it's like, until you know the obstacle, you really don't know what you're selling.
Yeah.
So you have to identify that obstacle.
So on that subject matter, it gets back to my process piece, right? So in any interaction with a potential client, right? The first thing you have to do is identify their concerns and their needs. And how do we do that? Questions, and questions.
Yeah, more questions than statements.
Absolutely. You got the old adage, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? The best salespeople that I know are the best listeners that I know. They hear what needs to be heard. They hear what's in between the words. They ask clarifying questions. They understand exactly what the other person, what their intention is and what their need is before they go offer something. And if you do your questioning sequences right, no matter whether it's a simple transaction for a milkshake or a complex financial transaction, you will learn everything you need to learn if you figure out how to ask questions, pay attention, and listen for the details and the nuance in people's voices, tonation, body language, and everything else. It is an exercise of observation.
Yeah, absolutely. Zig always said that, if you keep your mouth shut, the customer will tell you how to sell them.
100%.
And you just have to listen. If you go off on how many players you've gotten to college scholarships or to the major leagues or all this, and all they want is their son or daughter not to be embarrassed on the playground, then you're going the wrong direction. And they start thinking, wow, this isn't the place for me because they're going to put too much pressure. So I think that's true with any sport. If you go into, we had a gentleman we interviewed that runs a mixed martial arts academy. Very, very interesting. But there's some people that just go into it because they want to look better or feel better or get in shape. And then there's other people that want to be able to kick somebody's butt, I suppose. Is that true, Niall? Niall's our fighter in the group.
Yeah, it's good just to learn a skill. I think it was important to just have an outlet for myself to, kick some butt, sweat a little bit, hang out with the guys, with the crew. It's a good outlet for me.
But I think the reality is that's not how everybody approaches it. And so if I were trying to sell you a membership to my gym, Niall, on the premise of, hey, gain some flexibility back, that's not really a sales point for you, right? That's not really a reason you do it. And there may be other people who don't really ever want to punch someone or get punched by someone. And so for them, they're never going to engage in the sparring activities or the fighting activities, but they want to learn all the moves and they want to be able to perform them, right?
I think in sports, the vast majority of benefits that people gain from sports long-term have nothing to do with the sport. The best takeaway from being on a baseball team is being part of a team. The discipline of showing up, the discipline of practice, the listening, all those things will go with you long after.
I mean, overcoming failures, the ability to self-cope with disappointment and frustration, and the ability to be resilient and to learn grit. And I mean, it's nonstop in the athletic world, right? And I'll tell you what, in my sales businesses, I have always leaned into people that were athletes. I've always leaned into hiring athletes because they have that resiliency. They have that ability. Know someone who could benefit from our business expertise? Send them our way. Thank you.
It's interesting. I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting yesterday, and open discussion. Someone said the biggest challenge in small business right now is hiring and keeping people. And I brought up exactly what you just said. Look for athletes. Look for someone who's already succeeded in a group setting and thrives on that. If you engage them, and we need to get, at some point, we're going to dig into the interview process a little bit deeper, but that's what you have to come out of the interview with. Find out, is there a passion for improvement, on growth, on, and I think you get people that way. And as you're convincing a prospect to join you, if you spend all your time focused on something that they're not interested, like Niall's flexibility or my horsepower.
Well, I'll tell you a great story. One of my mentors in business, a gentleman by the name of John Hollis out of Cleveland, Ohio, he always got, back to cars, the Mercedes-Benz S-Class S500, right? It's their Mama Luke, their flagship, right? And his buddy kept saying, dude, you got to check out the Lexus 460. You got to check out the Lexus 4. You go check it out. So he walks on to the lot. He said, I want to look at the Lexus LS 460, which is, it's a $100,000 car. So, the sales guy's like, all right, let's go. And he said the sales guy started and didn't shut up the entire time about the car, right? Just kept saying about the features, this, and all John cared about was whether, when he shut his door, that it sucked in.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the only feature. The way his trunk, you don't slam it. It just and you shut the door, and he said he walked off the car lot. Guy, like, you didn't ask me one thing. All I care about is whether the doors. Oh yeah, the doors suck. And he's like, what are you? I'm not buying this car. Like, get out of here.
I think in sports business we have that same problem. We talk about gymnastics.
7 kids go to the world championship, and 3 kids in the World Series, and we've got this kid at the Little League.
Eight level 9s and 6 level things, and we've had, so all those things become irrelevant if all they want is a better fitness level. So the gymnastics in itself has to have a compelling story. And if you make part of your story all those lifetime benefits of the sport, so nobody talks about, one of the most compelling things to my daughter going into cross country is the average GPA of someone on the cross country team is 22% higher than the rest of the graduating class. That's interesting to me, that it's either attracting very intelligent people with
discipline,
or they have this discipline. And the big thing about cross country is working through pain, and they have this tendency to continue. They're not going to give up in the middle of it. Yep. So that's something that you can sell. If you want your child to have a better life and one more advantage to succeed in life, this sport can do that for them.
Well, and I'll give you, in my business, in my business career, we kind of help families navigate the difficulties of the college admissions process and the inherent financial burden of higher education. And it's funny because I deal with all walks of life, business owners, executives, Joe Schmoes off the street, construction workers, all these people. And so in a consultation, right, with this person, which is really a sales consultation, it's my figuring out if I can help that family. I spend 45 minutes asking nothing but questions and trying to understand more and understand more and understand more until I'm ready to say, hey, listen, you had this concern, and this concern. right? Do you agree with that? Well, here's how we can solve those problems if you want to do business with us. So the point that I'll make is know all of the benefits, right? Know the benefits of lifelong physical fitness, know the benefits of teamwork and the benefits of resiliency and grit and all the things that are taught in the sport. But then wait until the person tells you what they're really interested in, or ask the questions to understand what they're really interested in. Because the difference between getting someone to sign up their child or sign up themselves for the classes, if you figure out what their purpose is and you have a fit for that purpose, you deliver that and it's done, right? That you said, Zig always says, if you listen long enough, people will tell you how to sell them. Well, if I walked into a gymnastics facility, right? Am I walking in for me, number one, or am I walking in for my child? Did they ask that question? No. Well, why? Just because I'm a 40-year-old male at 250 pounds, I can't do gymnastics? I will tell you right now, we can go out into a mat and I can do a front handspring.
Let's go.
Right? But they don't know that it's for me. Question number one to me is, well, are you signing up or are you signing up? Right? Is it, do you like group settings or private lessons? Just understanding that stuff. And it's not a selfish thing to understand the desires of another person. It's your job. Right? So if someone walks into a baseball facility and say, hey, we're here, we're just checking the place out. Well, what do you want to, what are you interested in? You a good hitter? You playing this year? Have you played for a long time?
Well, it gets back to questions. Right? You're talking questions. So to go back to your request for a hungry crowd,
mm-hmm.
I think sometimes what you do is you have to give information that makes them hungry or thirsty. So I'm another Zig Ziglar story. I love Zig Ziglar. I wish I could do his voice. He's got that Southern draw. He's great to listen to on tape. But his story.
He said tape, everyone.
Yeah, sorry. Listen to on. Anyway.
Digital audio?
Yeah. Okay, that's enough.
Go ahead.
Can we cut this part out?
No.
I actually enjoyed that.
Highlight it. His story.
Did you get out your old CDs too?
In working with a bartender that said the bar was failing, he's going to have to close down. And he couldn't afford to buy more drinks. He couldn't get more stools at the bar. And Zig said, you don't need any of that. You need to get more pretzels. And his whole thought was, the people just aren't thirsty enough. They'll buy it. They'll stand at the bar. They don't need a stool. If they're thirsty enough, they'll drink. Now, for some reason, I can relate to that. So that's where it goes. But it's if you tell your story that creates enough thirst, enough hunger, then you're going to sell the most burgers or the most drinks at a bar or the most classes. And I think if your contention is you leave yourself open to, even if you're not going to offer the service in the way they want it, you don't do a zillion private lessons or you don't do it that way. Listen to what they want. And that's where you start. That's the only object that you have to, clear.
Yeah. And I want to kind of comment back on your, we have the conversation all the time. We have it as we're consulting with small companies in the athletic space. I have it when I'm consulting with companies in the financial space as well, which is, well, I don't sell, right? Well, I'm not a salesperson. Get that out of your brain.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to do that is to train everybody about how you want them to deal with an interaction, because that's all sales is. It's customer service, satisfying a need, and handling whatever objection comes to the table. So if someone walks in the door and you own a gymnastics facility, baseball facility, soccer, lacrosse, how do you want them greeted? How do you want them to be addressed? Hey, how are you? What's your name? Can I help you? What are you interested in? Why are you here? If you do that and tell everybody what you expect, and then you have everybody practice what you expect, then that's exactly what they'll do, because they're prepared for that moment. The reason people think are bashful about sales or don't want to be in sales or think they're not sales is because they're afraid to be heard. They're afraid of their voice. They're afraid of their interaction. They're going to mess it up. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't have the confidence to do it. And Steve, how do we build confidence in humans?
By doing.
By doing.
Yeah.
Practice. right? So, whether it's a sales script on a phone, whether it's how you're going to operate your Zoom meeting, whether it's an in-person interaction, whether it's you're serving fudgy wudgies at the county fair, right? How you interact with that person dictates the sale every single time. So if you're not training people how you want them to interact, you can't expect them to close the deal. Whether the deal is selling a fudgy wudgy or signing someone up for a 12-week class or getting someone to pay you $5,000 for consulting or getting someone to buy and move $3 million under your management. It's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Different levels, different scales. More information might be necessary to move, several $1 million than would be to sell someone a fudgy wudgy. But what if they don't like fudge? What if they don't like, okay, well, how about a chipwich? Well, how about a king cone,
I think one of the dominant ways to tell that story or to craft the story is to listen. The first lesson an old Zig Ziglar line, his best closing technique was feel, felt, found. And it was the one he lived in. And anything you hear that is anywhere near an objection, say the Jones family, felt the same way. They found that by doing this, and so you craft the whole thing, and to where you have a story with a hero at the end, and the customer is the hero, and this is how you're going to make your child or this parent the hero in this when they go home and say, "Listen, we just signed you up for this class," and it's that hero mentality. Too often, salespeople think that they have to become the hero in it. And I think it's so much more about making that customer feel heroic in what their decision is.
So one of the other things that, if we're talking sales tactics, for lack of a better expression, one of the things that I've always believed and what has made me successful is I really empower other people to make critical decisions, right? So I give them the information they need. I give them the options they want. I listen to their kind of worries, which are objections, right? I listen to the concerns, and I try and manage all the objections before they ever happen, right? If you listen, you can understand the objection. And if you can explain the objection, it's no longer a hurdle. It's actually a benefit. It's a savvy that you bring to the table. Hey, I understand you feel a certain way. Here's how we solved that problem. Here's what I did with another family, or here's how another student took it, and so empowering people to own the decision is huge, because there's a whole nother subject that we'll talk about in another one, which is buyer's remorse, which buyer's remorse can happen. I signed up, we really didn't want to do it, whatever. And they back out of it. That is a pressure sale like conundrum that people face. So if you empower someone to own the decision, they're not going to feel the buyer's remorse. They're going to feel very confident in that. And I go back every single time I do sales training, every single time I do managerial training, consulting with organizations, it's about instilling confidence in your employees, in your staff, in the people that are making decisions, and in your customers. If customers have confidence, you don't have a problem. And so part of sales is giving that confidence to others.
I also think that if you go into the sales situation thinking it's success or failure, that's really difficult. And maybe baseball prepares you better for that, because there is more failure in baseball. Yeah. But if you go into it looking, it's either success, I get the client, or I learn a lesson. And I'll never forget, I was selling childcare franchises 100 years ago. And I started right in saying why our franchise was better than this other one, and better than, and we do this, they don't do this, we don't do this. And the customer, as I'm walking, I said, I'll get back to you, but here's a lesson for you. And I was a young guy, he was an older guy. He says, never sell against a ghost. He said, you just beat somebody that I had never heard of, but now I'm going to look them up. So it's you got to stay on track, and goes back to what you said from the very beginning, more listening than talking. You'll learn what they want, only clear the obstacles that are put in front of you.
And we always say you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable or asking the question that you might not want to ask. Like in that scenario, I'd say, well, where are you in this process? How many other franchises have you looked at? What else? And if they say, well, I've looked at none, you're the first. I said, that's great because you found the best. Let's figure out how to get this done. Let me explain to why we're the best. Or, oh, I've looked at so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. All right, let's throttle. What'd you think of this one? Well, how'd you feel about their process? Then only when you learn enough can you speak about that, right?
Yeah, and there's no need at that time to sell the quality of your teachers if the driving influence is the geographic location.
Yeah.
So you have to prove that you're the best within a mile.
Yeah.
And then back that up. But you don't want them. So I'm giving a talk at an upcoming conference, the U.S. Gymnastics Congress, on converting your waiting list into a revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to go through details of what's the problem with having a waiting list. Some people say, it's good because if somebody cancels out, I got one more waiting. But as soon as you put somebody on a waiting list, consider that you've just told them to go shopping.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude that they get. Now they're going shopping. So instead of not getting that big sale, they're not going to be a 5-day-a-week customer. Get them into an open gym once a month. Get them started. Get them engaged somehow in your business, and then you can expand from there.
Yeah. Well, I could go on for days, and I think what we should do is hit each of the points. One of the
things I want to do next week is dig into some specific objections that you get, and just that you just did one there. But let's take objections and see, okay, what's the best way of identifying it, stabilizing it, and then hurdling that objection? I think that'll be fun.
I love it. And then we'll do kind of the retention piece and the referral piece after that, and then kind of bring full circle back sales. So I know we're out of time. Went a little long today. Obviously, Steve and I could talk on this subject matter for
you get
eons.
A group of salespeople in the room, and they end up buying each other's cars.
That's it. All right, everybody. This has been Paradigm Playbook. Thanks for listening.
Make it a great week.
If you have any business-related questions, feel free to send them over to us at playbook@paradigmplaybook.com. We're here to help.